here. All right, looks like we might be recording again, which is good. And then, so this part 2 is really an overview on this week 4's expectations. And so we'll start out by talking about the discussion, color usage through the ages. We've been talking a lot about color in the cultural and symbolic meanings. And so we are going to, I'm gonna bump over here, do a new share for the whole desktop so that we can easily navigate here. All right, there we go. So in this week's discussion, it's a whole thing. So imagine you've been asked to give a guest presentation on the meaning and use of a single color to a class of 3rd grade students. So what I like about this is we're kind of thinking similar to the way that we thought that first week when we were doing that infographic to the 11-year-olds. So this is all interesting stuff for us to think about demographics too. So I just want to point that out. Students know that you're a graphic designer and have a keen eye and knowledge about colors, so they are eagerly awaiting your presentation. So just think about that. You want to choose a single color that you'll research for this discussion. So the color choice is completely up to you. Doesn't have to be any color that, there's no requirement here, and I used white. So next answer, you want to answer the following questions. How was the color used in history? So talk about its evolution a little bit. Like, you don't have to be super in depth about all cultures and its evolution. You can talk specific to the US if you want, or the Western society. What stories might you tell them about the color's beginnings? If you want to do a little compare and contrast with other cultures, that's fine too. Maybe educate what are they, 3rd graders? Yeah. Yeah. Make sure that the students know a little bit about, its history, and the history does kind of overlap into other cultures, so that's important. And then the third topic to cover is what global brand color associations would you use to illustrate how the color is being used today? So similar to what you've been doing the last 3 weeks, pulling up examples of different logo identities and then talking about those color associations within the brands and what they represent. You can illustrate that, but try and do it to the 3rd grade students. So they're 8 years old, about 8 or 9 years old. And so that can be a challenge, but in the one thing I want to say is just have fun with it. Think about simple, think about fun, and then talk about that in your discussion. So think of some examples that might help there. Make sure you post your first post by Wednesday, and then of course respond to at least 1 or 2 other students by Sunday to try and get that conversation going. Let's have fun with this. Have fun this week in the discussion. So that leads us to the assignment. So the assignment, the story of a single color. It's a little bit intense assignment, and I think it'll be fun for us to pull all the knowledge that we gained this mod into one presentation. We are going to discuss the cultural and symbolic meanings of one single color. And we're going to identify and apply the impact of color within the historical past and contemporary present of graphic design. So again, pulling that history into the present, and through that is the only way we can really gain a really good understanding of history of color and the impact. And it really does that evolution. So this is going to be done through a PowerPoint presentation. So I'm going to go over to the assignments. So as we know, it's due Sunday, no later than 11:59 p.m. So let's make sure we get that in, students. And then the prompt for this is you're going to create and record a presentation telling the story of a single color. So you're going to have at least 7 slides, but of course you can have more if you know it warrants more slides. Don't feel like you have to. You don't feel like you have to have just 7. So you're gonna have a title slide, you're gonna have a color wheel relationship, what's its complement, what colors are analogous. Show us those wheels maybe pulled from your first week's assignment, the infographic. That's something that I think could be really nice because I think that can really help us understand and where you're coming from with your understanding of color. All right, so definitely these things are important to show in the first few slides, just as an introduction to color and your understanding of that one color. So again, if you're going to do green, then you might have the title slide. You can give it a nice title if you want. You can also then enter in with the color wheels of showing us what is across from green. You could show the full wheel and maybe highlight the green, however you want to do it. That part is kind of open to your own creativity. And then how is the color formed on the color wheel? Does that, for example, what's on either side of the green? Is it green, yellow, green, blue, green, you know, what happens with that green as it goes around the wheel? You kind of might want to point that out. And then the third slide, you'll talk a little bit about that history of green, symbolism of green, as we've been doing all 4 weeks. So a lot of this, you've already gathered the information, and you can integrate some of this information from the discussion to this slide or this slide presentation. The contemporary significance and symbolism of green. Talk about that. Maybe you have a slide on what is really important. Pull from what is really impactful of that color across cultures, and pull from some of my lectures. You can go back into any one of the live sessions and find your color and see really what tonight I'm going to do a little bit of that too. I'm going to do an overview on all the colors, and you can pull from that information and bring it into your own PowerPoint presentation. You'll do a contemporary significance and the symbolism of that color, just like you're doing in the discussion this week. So again, they tie together. You don't have to do double research on any of this. You can tie all of this together if you wish. The 6th slide, contemporary example of the color being used in design. So whether it's a brand identity, maybe it's a logo that you've used in your infographic from last week. Maybe you were choosing the color pink, and you then use a logo that has pink in it, and you bring it all into this slide number 6 and talk about its symbolism and talk about how it's being used in design. And then number 7, sources. You want to, of course, cite your sources and websites as you do in your discussions. Do that in your last slide, slide number 7, or if you have more slides, do it in another slide. Some of you might really get going and decide that you want to keep adding slides. Just don't make it too long, but because you're going to be embedding some audio in there as well. Okay, so choose whatever color you'd like I said, create your presentation in PowerPoint, use a blank template, and design your own presentation. So what that means is when you're in PowerPoint, if I'm in PowerPoint and I'm creating a new presentation, you either design it in the way that you like, or you can go into a certain type of layout that you like up here, type caption, picture with caption, lots of different ways that you can go about, you know, also there's like a file, new from template, that's acceptable here. We're using PowerPoint to communicate color. Of course, I'd love to see you design your own, but I also want to see you keep it to a grid. So if you do file, new from template, you might choose any one of these that could also support. I've always liked this Atlas one too. Just a certain type of consistent grid structure when you're in here. to keep us going without being confused. So we're going to discuss the cultural and symbolic meaning of that single color throughout the slides. We're going to identify and apply the impact of color within historical past and contemporary present. So how has that color evolved? So when you are finished and with your presentation, I want you to record yourself narrating the content. So I know that's a little, I'm going to show you how to do that. Your narrated presentation should be 2 to 3 minutes in total length, which is not very long at all. So I'll go back to that PowerPoint here. I'm doing a new presentation. And let's just say, this is my new I'm just pasting a bunch of, so I've got 7 slides here and I start and maybe I want to change this design up a little bit. You can certainly do that. Maybe you delete this for one slide. Every other slide you add a little variation, which might be nice. Okay. And then you can get more information on certain slides. You can move these around a little bit, but then you do have the standard core design, which is kind of nice. But you're going to want to integrate some audio. And so the way to do that is you can either record the audio yourself, however you want to do that. I know some people on their iPhones have audio recording. I know some people can do that in multiple ways. You might do it within Zoom. You might do it here in your Apple computer, which I don't do often just standing alone, but I know that you can do that. I believe as an MP4 maybe, I'm not sure. But what I do know is to add that in to your PowerPoint presentation. It's simple as you go into insert. You can go into insert, and then what you might do is do insert audio, and then you can include it from the file. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint only here, because I think I see that there's a chat message. Oh, good, Adobe Audition. So you do have a way, Raymond, to record outside. I'm glad to hear that. Whatever way you want to record is fine with me, as long as you can get it back into the PowerPoint. And I'm showing you how to do that now, which is just within PowerPoint. Make sure you can do audio browser, audio from file, or you can go ahead and just record audio, pull it up. And then, for example, I just do narration 1. And then I'll hit this button and it's recording me, testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, testing. So that's here. And then you can hear me talk. This button and it's recording me, testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, testing. Okay, so you can integrate that into each one of your pages separately. All right, so that's another way to do it quite simply. If you're having trouble, if you do run into any troubles integrating the audio from Adobe Audition or however you want to work it, that's fine. Just go ahead and integrate it here by recording here. It might even be easier. If not, do it however you want. So that's how one might do that. Now, if I were to begin building these slides, of course, I want to pull in all the information that we talked about here. So that symbolic meaning of the color, I'm going to choose a color. I'm going to pull that in here. I want to pull some of my research. I'm going to show, this might be my title page. This page might show my color wheels. If I chose the color green, I'm going to show the color wheels with green and maybe highlight green and what's across from it, what's its analogous color, and what's its complementary color, all the things that are so important that we've discussed. That we've discussed here. Contemporary significance of the symbolism, contemporary example of it in design. So don't forget that. Like you're going to give me the history. You're going to do the color wheel. You're going to provide all of that. You know, how is the color formed on the wheel? All of that kind of stuff. You can give me a little information on each of the pages, not just a visual example. You don't have to go overboard on the type, but then of course the contemporary example of the color being used in design, in contemporary design. So how is it used? Maybe I choose Starbucks. I use that example because it is so successful, but maybe I use the Starbucks green. That's an example of green being used in an identity system. Maybe I use it in a different way. Maybe I point out other logos and why green works for that. Maybe it's some kind of sustainability company, and green is supporting that mood and tone. And we recognize here in the Western contemporary world that green is important and symbolizes recycling and being sustainable and being energy efficient and all of those things. So these are important things to bring forth within your PowerPoint presentation that can help us understand and maybe reiterate to third grade students. So again, choose whatever color you'd like. And when you're finished with the presentation and the recording, you want to save your file, save it as DES116, and then make sure the audio is embedded into your presentation. And then export to a multi-page PDF. Name your PDF. Zip both the PowerPoint and the PDF files together. I want both of those files uploaded, and then submit them. So let's see, don't save that one. Okay, so any questions about the discussion or the assignment yet? I want to make sure that I catch any questions. Okay. All right, looks like there might be a question. Okay, no questions, that's good. All right, so assessment, cumulative quiz. So that quiz will just like be a huge review on what we've already discussed throughout the term. It is cumulative, meaning it reviews weeks 1, weeks 2, weeks 3, and now week 4. So you'll identify different color types and how they're created, the CMYK, 4-color process, breakdown used for print, RGB, red, green, blue, used for digital screen purposes, and then hex code colors, which are used for web design, applying digital colors across websites, using within the digital space as well. So why are we using them? How the types are created? And then, you know, you can explain to me within the color picker, there are several breakdowns. You talk about how they're used and why they're important and the differences, compare and contrast there. If you understand that, you should be able to answer those questions correctly. And then differentiate between the appropriate RGB and CMYK usage in production, which I just covered a little bit. Also define the importance of accessibility and color choices and web design. For example, talk about that ratio that we discussed in the last week's assessment and designed in Photoshop. Define hues, tints, tones, and shades of color. So just like we did for last week's assignment with the 5 different gifts. You all did that well. The hues are different types of colors. So different hues are like orange, yellow, red, purple, blue, and green. Tints are those light colors of green. So we've got 10% green, 20% green, 30% green, 40% green, up through 100% green, right? Tones are various types of green, so all with the same hue, but they range in tone. So tonal range, meaning if you've got gray as a white to black, there's a tonal range. That can also be considered a tint, so not to be confused. But with the green, we've got different tones. We've got emerald green, we've got pine green, like different, I'm just trying to think of some examples right now that might help you understand tone a little better. And then shades of color, that is, if you think of it in paint terms, when you add a little gray or black, you start to get shades of that color. So those are the differences, and you want to be able to define them and be able to answer those correctly. Next, discuss the role color plays in the big 4 design principles. So that is contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. So the CRAP principles that we discussed, I believe, in week 1 and 2. So how does color play those roles? How do we use color? So that you might need to revisit week 1 and 2 to kind of remember how those principles are so important when we utilize color, and to continue to reflect upon those as you build any projects moving forward. You'll want to describe warm and cool colors and color schemes that can be used with warm and cool. Okay, so that's really the cumulative quiz for week 4. And then the career integration quiz will ask you certain questions about the course, about myself, and about certain things you've learned with color and how you might apply them in your career moving forward. So if there's anything that I can do to support that, please let me know. I'm here to help that way. Okay, so for week 3, we talked about week 3 last week. This will be week 4. All right. So we talked about the discussion. Imagine you've been asked to give a guest presentation in the meaning and use of a single color to a class of 3rd grade students. The students know that you're a graphic designer, like I had read this to you a little while ago, and have a key eye and knowledge about colors. So this is kind of fun. I really like this discussion this week. I think it's fun for all of us to think about how we might embark upon something like this with a class of 3rd graders. So some of the things to consider, you can do a little search, fun facts about color, and then of course, you can make the discussion more interesting. Like I said, I really want to have fun with this discussion. It's pretty straightforward, so make sure you address each of the questions in the discussion. So you could just Google it and then come up with some different facts that you could touch upon. So some of the things that I can share is color usage through the ages. Artists invented pigments through a combination of soil, animal fat, and burned charcoal as early as 40,000 years ago. So this article dives deep into the history of colors and the color psychology behind them. So that will be shared. And then in today's society, color is perhaps something we take for granted. We have thousands of colors at our disposal. It's really crazy to think all of the things that we've had in the past compared to what we have now. Like, it's just very different. We have thousands of colors, and then the science behind color psychology has evolved as well, and it has expanded. And there's also the history of colors. Below, we learn about each of them, some of our favorite colors, and how they were created, and how they've evolved through design in society. Some of these are good to know as you embark upon this week's expectations. For example, red. We kind of all have the same idea about red. Um, it's rich color. It's it's kind of startling. Use of the pigment can be traced way back to ancient Egypt, where it was considered both a color of vitality and celebration. Evil and destruction is associated with red. It was a staple hue throughout history, used in ancient Grecian murals, in Byzantine clothing to signal status and wealth as well, and then heavily applied throughout art movements, ranging from the Renaissance through to modern day art. It's considered to be a color of intense emotions, ranging from anger, sacrifice, danger, heat, love, passion, sexuality. So just a very, no doubt red is has made its mark upon us. Multiple cultures. Pink. So some of these are great to know if you are trying to pull some additional tidbits and don't know what color you're going to choose for your presentation for this week. That's expected for the assignment, the week 4 assignment. So pay close attention. I just got through reading red. So if you choose pink, you'll want to know that it's named after the flower of the same name. Pink is a vibrant, feminine color with an interesting history. Pink does not have as prolific a history in art and culture as some other colors, as more intense shades of red and crimson were often preferred. But during Renaissance, pink pigments started to be applied more often. As from there on, the color worked its way into the world of fashion, art, and design. We even have, notably, current culture, you can talk about how pink has even evolved into its own brand. That's the store, the Victoria's Secret store, Pink. So I point that out just because it is its own brand. Next, orange. Orange is that color they said men do not like orange. That was a very a huge generalization, but saying that a lot of times men did not prefer orange, and even many women did not like it. So it was startling to them, very strange. That was news to me. So sitting in between red and yellow in the color spectrum is orange. Historically, orange was used prolifically by the ancient Egyptians and medieval artists. The pigment often made out as a highly toxic mineral called orpiment, which contained traces of arsenic. So this is all these very interesting tidbits that I think those third graders would love to hear about. Before the late 15th century, Europeans simply referred to orange as yellow-red until they were introduced to orange trees, when the pigment was finally awarded its true name. During the 16th and 17th centuries, orange became a symbol of Protestantism and an important political color in Britain and Europe under William III's reign. Throughout art in the 18th and 19th century, orange became a symbol of Impressionism thanks to artists such as Renoir, Cézanne, and Van Gogh. It looks like a good orange. Looks refreshing right now. I've always liked the color orange. Next, we have yellow. Yellow is heralded as the color of sunshine and gold. Yellow is vibrant, and I will point out it is a warm tone. It's part of the warm family of colors. And that's obvious considering we think of yellow, we think of sunshine. Deriving the pigment from clay, yellow was thought to be one of the first colors ever used as a paint in prehistoric cave art, with the first application thought to be over 17,300 years old, which is pretty incredible if you think about it. And then ancient Egyptians were pretty prolific users of the color too. Thanks to its close association with gold, the color was considered eternal and indestructible. The world of art, with artists such as Van Gogh adopting it as its signature color to signal warmth and happiness. I like that. And I do believe yellow is considered calming too, but I do think it's also considered energizing, which is a little bit of a conflict there, or a contrast, I guess. Next, green. This, I would say, my favorite color. It's named after the Anglo-Saxon word grene, meaning grass, and grow. Green is a color which with close and distinctive ties to nature, the environment, and all things to do with great outdoors. And like I mentioned, how we've adapted that as our sort of sustainable, energy efficient, and recycling, thinking about nature and everything to do outdoors. We've adapted green as that signature color. Historically, green was a pigment that did not appear as early in prehistoric art as other hues, as it was a hard pigment to reproduce, surprisingly. Due to this, many art and fabric applications of green either turned out as a dull brownish green or eventually faded due to the temperamental pigments used. So it was only when synthetic green pigments and dyes were produced that green was seen more prolifically throughout modern art. Next up, blue, which I believe, Raymond, you said was your favorite color. Am I correct? Okay, awesome. Awesome. Yeah, blue is a wonderful color, and I think you'll like some of the stuff I'm going to share with you later regarding blue. Blue is a color that has long been associated with royalty, art, military, business, and nature, making it a color with a lot of applications. The first documented use of blue pigment is using blue azurite. I know blue is azure too, and is that Spanish for azure? I believe that's correct. A vivid, deep blue, naturally occurring mineral used widely in ancient Egypt for decoration and jewelry. Later in the Renaissance, the mineral was crushed and used as the expensive paint pigment, ultramarine. And I believe you can still have that pigment, ultramarine, and pay lots of money for that pigment if you're using expensive paints, if you're doing fine art. I used it when I was an undergrad and paid a pretty penny just to get a little bit of that pigment. Crimson also, crimson red. Okay, next up, purple. So a lot of these would be considered tints and shades and tones of purple. Sitting in between red and blue on the color spectrum is none other than purple. It's had a long, noble, and fairly regal history surrounding the hue. Since producing purple pigments was expensive and difficult, the color was often worn by those of high status. Royalty, of course, purple represents royalty. Throughout the Byzantine and Holy Roman empires, as well as Japanese aristocracy. And of course, we have purple as a very, here in the US, considered kind of a corporate tone, something also kind of representing a more high status type of thing. From here on out, purple remained a color to symbolize royalty and nobility throughout history until 1856, when the color became more accessible to the everyday person and simply became a signal of fashion and style instead. However, purple is still a color used by the British royal family and will forever remain the color of the royals. So the color brand of the royals is purple. Purple is a color that sits in an interesting place on the color spectrum, right in between warm red and cool blue, making it a color that can be both cool and warm depending on the specific shade. I love that, and I think that could be something to point out if anybody chooses purple for their presentation for week 4, for the assignment. Little hint there for you all. And then brown, and this is one of my least favorite colors to use in design, but it has its place. Like I had pointed out the UPS logo earlier on, maybe week 2. I think that it has a place, and if used properly, it can be a very powerful color. Held as what studies have shown to be the least favorite color of the public, so not alone. Brown is not a color to turn a blind eye to. Brown is considered to be one of the first pigments ever used in the prehistoric times and has been a staple of art and culture ever since. Brown has long been a symbol of the lower class. This association stemming from ancient Rome. when the color was donned by only by barbarians and people of low social and economic rankings. Interesting. It is also a color that was worn by the monks of the Franciscan order as a sign of poverty and humility. Okay. So a lot of history, kind of a powerful background. All right. So more fun facts about color. We've got people at a color run here. Has anyone ever been to a color run? I've been to one in my life. I don't think I'll ever do it again. It was fun, but a little bit bizarre with all those colors flying in the air. Okay. So I like this picture here showing that colors can trigger deep childhood memories, because that is so true. I'm going to ask right now, is there any color that comes to mind, Raymond, to you that maybe triggers an old childhood memory? If not, that's fine too. But I just thought I would check since we're talking about color. And yeah, the only thing that I can think of is grass and just like the color green. And maybe that's why I like it. I loved being in the grass when I was younger, but then my dad told me recently that I hated grass and I was afraid of it. So I never knew that. So we all have those weird stories, but I think just sunshine and green and grass. So this, maybe I can really attach to this photo a little bit. Feels like a nice day with a swing. And when you're a child, everything feels a little different. So now we're going to talk a little bit about some things that additional tidbits that might be helpful, especially when we're working on our assignment and assessment for this upcoming week. Blue was once seen as a low-class color. Interesting how colors attaching to class. I find that to be a little fascinating. According to Pastore, blue was one of the later colors to be adopted in the ancient world, with reds, blacks, and browns appearing in cave paintings. In ancient Rome, it was seen as the color of the working class, worn by those lower on the social ladder, while the wealthy wore white, black, and red. Pastore says that the color was seen as so far out of the mainstream that it was associated with barbarians and used to frighten enemies. Very interesting. Another tidbit on blue. The Virgin Mary transformed the meaning of blue. So we have what we saw here about it frightening enemies and seen as being of lower status. And then here we have that the low opinion of the color blue changed significantly when it became the color of the cloak of Virgin Mary as she developed in the 12th century. As the image became more widespread, the color was seen as far as respectable and worthy of reverence, spreading to other religious imagery. So I know that some of you have read this, but color for babies, very interesting enough, but they see red first. Not sure if anyone knew, but that is a fun fact for sure, especially if you're choosing the color red for your presentation. Did you know that judges used to dress in red? Perhaps because of these dramatic connotations and the fact that the Bible, the angel that expels Adam and Eve from paradise, was depicted in red clothing, judges in the Middle Ages preferred the color for their robes. As Pastore puts it, judges in actual courts, as the iconography of miniatures, were inevitably dressed in red, the color of their delegated power and their to state the law and render judgments in the place of the king, prince, city, or state. Powerful color, powerful past. So the power of pink. Pink can be a relaxing color. In fact, Dr. Alexander Schoss from Color Matters says, even if a person tries to be angry or aggressive in the presence of pink, he can't. So this is something that I find fascinating and interesting. So some prisons have their inmates in pink jumpsuits. And so if this is something too that you can reflect upon if you choose the color pink, pink has many different meanings. And I really love that, that there are several different things to think about when we think about pink. And that is just really cool tidbit. A few tidbits actually come out of the color pink. License to dye. During the Middle Ages, the dyeing trade was organized in such a way that professional dyers were only licensed to dye with certain colors, believe it or not. A person who dyed in green might not be allowed to dye in red, for example. This meant that the palette which the public could choose from was severely limited as well, prohibiting dyers from selling combinations of colors they were not licensed in. So, Sir Isaac Newton, he had many scientific accomplishments, but one of his most enduring was his findings on how light influences color. He developed experiments using prisms, projecting a rainbow spectrum that he could develop into his famed color wheel. You can find that here at Munsell.com. And then this debunked the view up to the point that color grew out of a combination of light and darkness, replacing it with the realization that light alone was responsible for color. So I've seen this model quite a bit. So this is interesting. Take a look at it where the light comes through the hole, bounces off the prism, and then of course, you've got a white card here and you can see how that might occur in the spectrum. So Milton Bradley on color. The famed game board maker, who also manufactured crayons and watercolors, saw color sensitivity as something akin to learning music. He sought to educate the public about the psychology of color in his book, Elementary Color, which included a special color wheel that scientifically matched and measured different colors. And you can think about, where we're speaking to third graders, this might be an interesting model to use also for your presentation. Just saying. I know you're focusing on one color, but just as a little example or something to talk about. These are just some little tidbits that could help any of you as you build your stuff for this week. Color even affects taste. So the exact same thing can taste different depending on the color of the dish in which it's served. This experiment would be fun to hold. So that was a discovery of scientists who conducted an experiment. You can Google it. Hot chocolate tastes much better in an orange cup. Participants taste the same hot chocolate from mugs of 4 different colors: white, cream, red, and orange. And across the board, the chocolate in the orange and cream colored mugs were considered better tasting than the other 2. So red and white did not win. Cream and orange were the ones that were, people said their hot chocolate tasted better. I love that. Very, very interesting. And then, so why do you care all about these tidbits? That'll be interesting. I think that you should care because not only are we moving into excelling within the program, but also because it helps you become a better designer when you know which colors to use, which color schemes are best, and what they represent. So without color, our designs are boring, clearly. Understand where colors come from. They can provide some creative ideas when brainstorming concepts for projects. What little known fact that you just learned put a different light on a color? Maybe you didn't know what I talked about. What struck me as being super interesting. So these are some facts I didn't know. And so when you learn about pink or about red, then that helps you make better decisions. So the lectures on today's History of Colors are from these websites. You can search best life online, color facts. These are 30 crazy facts about colors. And then this one is on Canva, color meanings. So any questions thus far? We're going to keep moving on. Oops. Okay. Don't have questions, so I will move on. Awesome. So since we have week 4, we talked a little bit about that assignment. I'm going to pause this here, this recording, and start a new recording in a moment. So I'll see you in the next recording.